Yeah, hello everyone. A very warm welcome to this investment outlook in NBS and fintech space. So we have a panel of eminent investors who are associated with industry players, and also Ashish ji will moderate the panel and give his thoughts on the current investment scenarios and outlook, and also discuss with investor. So it's over to Ashish ji.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you very much. So, friends, good morning. I'm Ashish Agrawal on behalf of JR Ladda Financial Services Private Limited. So, welcome to you all. Friends, first of all, I would like to thank you to all the speakers for joining with us today and taking time. These are all young, dynamic leaders in their industry, and they have all experience of investing in various sectors, mainly in NBFC and fintech sector. So, friends, today we will discuss about the equity investments in the NBFC or MFI or HFC in the past or in the current scenario and the future also. So, the topic is very relevant. If you are seeing in today's newspaper everywhere that there is a discussion about the debt on the NBFC side. So, if you see in the morning, more than five, six news articles are there on the debt side for NBFC, MFI, HFC, and different people are saying different version. And the RBI is behind the banks for giving the moratorium to NBFCs. Then the SEBI is working for the moratorium for NCD to NBFC. So there are lot of discussions are happening on the debt side. But in the past 30, 40 days, if I see, I have not seen much of the discussion on the equity side. So that's why we thought let us have a session and to discuss that there are a lot of questions in the mind of the people that how the NBFC will perform, how this valuation will be there. So these are the areas which need to be discussed, understand, and then you can basically get the information that how to take it forward. So, friends, the equity and debt both are very important from an NBFC point of view. If you see, these are part of the resource basically, and like husband and wife, so both debt and equity are there. So when we are talking debt and we are not talking equity, so it will not be a justification. So equity is equally important like debt. So before starting the deliberation from the speaker side, I would like to just give you the brief about the investments in the NBFC, the PBC investment in the private market, because we are talking about private market investment in the NBFC space. So if you see since 2018, when this ILFS crisis had happened, and a lot of discussions were there that NBFC sector will not grow and there will be a lot of challenges and all these things. So we could find out some data from the venture intelligence where in 2018 there were 37 investments in the NBFC space, and the total value was something around $2.2 billion, and so which is some roughly around from the today's contest it is something around 17, 18,000 crore rupees. And if you go into 2019, there were some 44 investments and $2.7 billion investments were there in the NBFC space. So roughly, if I see that the more than 80 investments were there in 2018 and 19 in the NBFC space, and if you see the marquee deals, so there were many marquee deals were there. If I go through the names, so this Aadhar got the investment from Blackstone. Then the ECL Finance, they got the investment from CDPQ. Then the DMI got the investment from NIS. So Avanza got the investment from Bawag. And then Nodala got the investment from the IIFL and the Chart. So these are some marquee investment which were there in these 2 years. So if we see, in spite of the challenges and in spite of LTCO or ILFS and DHFL, these names were there in the market that they got into a difficult situation. But the equity investment continued at the same pace, and rather there was a something around 16% growth in the equity side. So then we thought it will not be a justification. They will not discuss the current or in the past in 2 months whatever the equity investment had happened in the NBFC or fintech space. So friends, we have prepared a small PPT which will give you the idea that how this NBFC or fintech investments had happened in the COVID situation. So we have prepared a small PPT which will give you the idea what kind of investor, what kind of investment, what kind of NBFCs, and then the way forward from the JRL side, what we think that how the NBFC will behave. Can you just start the PPT?
Sure, sure. I'm just doing that. So I think everybody is able to see the PPT now. Yeah. Rashiji, I think you are able to see the PPT.
Yeah, अभी चालू भी हुआ.
Still on my side.
So, friends, in the last 2 months from 1st March to the 30th April, there were over 10 investments in the NBFC of fintech space. And out of that, the total amount which were invested was something around $250 million, which is something around 15, 17, 1800 crore in this space. And you see the kind of NBFC got the money. So companies which are into MSME lending, this education lending, even real estate lending, and the fintech companies. So it's a mix of category investment. Then the kind of investor who invested money, you see that the angel investor, the BC fund, private equity investors, even the banks like ICICI invested in one of the NBFC. So then the corporates. So this Ambit got the investment from Poonawalla. It's a corporate to corporate investment. Then we got some secondary deals also. So it's last 2 months. There's a mix of investment in the NBFC space by the different kind of investors. So that's a good sign that the investor are coming forward and they are investing in the difficult time also. And it shows that there will be the momentum like this only. And these are the deals which have completed. There are many deals which are in the pipeline and which are yet to be closed. So we will discuss that because we have marquee investors here. We'll discuss that how the deals will be closed and what will be the impact on the deals. Then, if you see, friends, going forward, what we see from the JRL point of view, what can be the strategy of the NBFC or MFI or HFCs or fintech companies from the investment point of view. So it is always it will be better that keeping in mind the current challenges, if we go for the partnership model, that will help to broad base your book and to de-risk yourself also to some extent. So the NBFC should focus through partnership by the co-lending or BC partnerships and the other partnerships. Then there should be they should keep ready about their information. So because there will be a lot of data analysis now. So every investor will ask the whatever what happened in your portfolio, what kind of growth you are looking for. So there will be 100 questions. So it is important for all the players in this space to keep their data ready from all point of view. That is very important. And then we think that the NBFCs which are focusing on reducing their cost, they are focusing on technology. So they will be having a better chance to get the even debt and equity both. So this is the brief from our side about the sector, what happened in the last 2 years and the current situation. And friends, so if you see the momentum is there from the investment point of view. And you see the investment which already I have discussed. So it is okay. I think no need to open this PPT now.
Okay. Okay, I'll just hide.
So friends, now I would like to invite our esteemed speakers from the investor side on today's topic. So before I think inviting them, I would like to just give you the brief idea that all these four speakers are having some common things in their company. So one is that the all these I think the investors or the speakers today, they are helping the country in terms of the financial inclusion. So achieving the goal of financial inclusion through their investing company. That is a very important area which I think we need as the country. So that's an important part which they are doing through their investing company. Then these investors are helping mid and small companies in the NBFC space. So which is a very important part. Large companies are having a lot of avenues of raising equity from different market and different areas. But the major need is on the NBFC side with the small and mid NBFCs. So which is very important from the market point of view. Then we see the another common area which is basically they are most of the investors are having the first investment in their NBFC. So if I see all these four esteemed speakers, they have invested in many NBFCs. They're first as first investors. So that is another thing. But getting first investment is a very difficult task. After that, the challenges are not that much. So that is another I think. And if I see all these speakers are having HFC, MFI, or NBFC and fintech company in their portfolio. So they have very good experience of investing money in different NBFCs and the sector. So I would like to invite Smriti Chandra, a lady first, so to just brief about her organization, how this NMI is working in this sector, what kind of investment they have done, how they are looking for this sector in the coming days. So over to Smriti. Please carry forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashish. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar here. I think we have an esteemed panel here with all our co-investors. Actually, we've invested across different companies together. Coming to NMI, I represent Nordic Microfinance Initiative. I'm an investment director with them. Nordic Microfinance Initiative is a fund which was initiated almost 11 years ago to invest purely into financial inclusion. And more specifically, the focus has been on microfinance as a sector. We so far have about $250 million plus of investment so far across 3 regions in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And India becomes a large part of the portfolio. Today, we have investments in about 10 odd companies in India, purely equity investments. And that spans across SFBs, NBFCs, and NBFC MFIs. We're typically relatively early stage investors. We support companies when they are just in the stage of growth and support them through follow-on rounds after that. We are a double bottom line investor, which means that while we look at profitability and financial sustainability of the companies as one of the key factors, we also measure the social performance and the parameters that come along with it. So impact is as important as sustainability, and that's how we look at our investments. To just name a few, we are invested in Utkarsh Small Finance Bank, Northeast Small Finance Bank, Swasti Microfinance, Sabke, and so on and so forth. Dwara is another NBFC which we have invested in. So we have a combination of NBFC, NBFC MFIs, and SFBs, and the outlook for most of them is quite similar in different ways. What we have found so far, and we've been very closely monitoring all our portfolio companies over the last month or so, 4 to 5 weeks. And the importance really is to make sure that there is sustainability and liquidity positions are intact. And what we've found is that all the companies actually are reasonably okay for the 3 months or the current quarter. I think where we are looking at being uncertain is what really happens after the moratoriums are kind of over, and what kind of delinquencies will we start seeing at that point in time. So as equity investors, we typically tend to take a very long-term view on our investments. and which means that at present the focus for us is to basically see what kind of equity. Right now, we don't see a great need. All of them are well capitalized. But I think if there is a second wave of COVID that's going to come and we see a huge surge in cases, there is surely going to be an impact on our customer segment and therefore our companies. So that's our focus on the existing portfolio. Now, in terms of outlook, I think, as I mentioned, we have a very long-term view on the sector, and we firmly believe that the fundamentals of the business is not changing. The demand that is there in the country is not changing. It's probably the shifting in the time that we have to look at investments. We're not kind of stalling investment evaluation. In fact, where we had actually completed our diligence processes and we were well advanced stages, we've actually closed those investments as well in the last one or 2 months. That
So I think we'll come back to you. There is some I think challenge in I
yes,
think
when we're looking at completely new, a very broad outlook of us.
so. Thank you, Smriti. I think it's a wonderful deliberation, and I think you have cleared that what kind of investments you have done, and you look for social parameters. So we will come later on to you basically to discuss what kind of social parameters you just you see in the NBFC and the other investing companies. And you are told that you are already having some investment which are in pipeline. So we'll discuss on that also. So now I would like to invite Mr. Binay. Binay is from Stakeboard Capital, and he is from Chennai. So Binay, can you just brief about your fund and what kind of investments you have done and how do you see this sector? Binay, can you just, your mic is off.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ashish, and good morning to everyone. Happy to be on this panel talking about financial services. Actually, Ashish, I thought you would begin with the best piece of news we've had in recent days, which is that SBI is looking to extend moratorium, to their, lenders, or rather to their borrowers, which is something that we've all been looking and desperately sort of seeking. So I'm sure it comes as a relief to, I don't know how many of the financial services firms are, logged into this call. So that's a big relief. Hopefully they do follow through on that. But just to go back to Stakeboard Capital, we are a bit different from the rest of the panelists here. We are an SME focused fund. We focus a lot on healthcare, technology, and manufacturing. And obviously, we've looked at financial services in the past and continue to look at financial services as well. Dwara KGFS is one of our portfolio companies. We continue to look at other such good companies as well. And one of the things that we look at, and this was pre-COVID obviously, is that we look at very strong sort of balance sheet positions, good liquidity positions for our companies across sectors, irrespective of whether they are in financial services or not. And that was not obviously, predicting the COVID stress, but in general, we want our companies to be strong and weather any storms that come through. So fortunately, with what's been happening in the last couple of months with COVID, a lot of many of our portfolio companies are reasonably safe for the moment. But as Smriti said, no one knows how long this is going to continue. So we'll sort of wait and watch on that, right? Just in terms of, some of the perspectives that I've sort of had, given that I've been able to look across sectors and then sort of temper financial services in terms of what the other sectors are seeing. Typically, what we've seen is obviously manufacturing-based companies. I've seen a serious hit, especially in April. May is hopefully going to be better given the lockdown is getting eased a bit more. Financial services compared to other sectors is possibly much larger hit, and especially MFI, vehicle finance to an extent, and MSMEs. Technology is a sector that we've seen dips in revenues, but we've actually not seen that level of catastrophic damage to monthly revenues or collections or any of that sort. So that seems to be a better sort of cushion. But yeah, financial services is something where we're seeing the damage there, but hopefully a lot of the companies that we have and other companies as well have better liquidity positions to sort of come through. So just in terms of the fund, to complete the thought, we do between $5 to $10 million checks in our SME firms. We are raising another fund where we will probably look through between $10 to $20 million sort of check sizes there. So.
Okay. Thank you, Binay. Thank you very much. I think you are the fund where you are investing at the later stage. I think it's a PE fund kind of investment.
Yeah.
So that's great. I think although you have investment in the financial sector, we will discuss. Do you have some time, or you are having your meeting now?
I'll have to drop off at 11:35, so I have another 10 minutes.
Okay. So great. So now I would like to invite Abhishek Agrawal. Abhishek is from Axion. It's a US-based fund, or rather, it's a giant in the investment space. And Abhishek has experience of national and international both. So I think it will be great if you can give your outlook about the Indian from the Indian point of view, and from international point of view also. You have investment in other part of the countries. So what is happening there actually, and how do you see the future of this sector from your point of view? So over to Abhishek.
No, thank you very much, Ashish, and warm welcome to everybody. Very excited to be here, part of this panel. I think could not have been at more appropriate than this timing, particularly as Vinay said that SBI has just come with this announcement, and that's a big positive news, which we all, from an equity side as well as the portfolio companies, have all been waiting. That what will be the SBI reaction, and with SBI, I think others will start to follow the suit. I hope the HDFC can also follow this. Not sure, given the Deepak Parekh has already given in a statement over there. But let's see. I think very comforting, given what has happened in last 24 hours. So quickly, I think I will not take too much time on the Axion side. We are 58, 59-year-old institution, have been only focused in financial services space, and we do very early stage to the growth capital from our three funds. And the three funds are Venture Lab, which does seed investments, very early stage investments up to $500,000 in the companies, largely fintech, followed by Kona Capital, which is growth capital investments. And then we have the Global Investments, which does the early stage or traditional financial services investments, and so on and so forth. While we make the investments into our companies, one of the big thesis for us is also to work with these companies through our advisory support, which comes in the various areas such as the digital engagement, risk management, client engagement, new products, innovations, and others. In India, we have been roughly now for last 13 years. And in the last 13 years, we have made more than 23, 24 investments, some exits, and while I think we all are learning about what has been happening with this pandemic, I think none of us have seen something like this. While in the international market we have seen Ebola and sometimes the hurricanes and other stuffs, but this is unseen. Nobody can give the predictions that this is what can happen with this. Everybody is learning on a daily basis with what we see, what we hear. So we are ourselves evolving and trying to learn, get a grasp on this. And the situation is, the good part is that the situation is not very different from what we see in one country to the other, because the crisis is pretty much the same. Everybody is talking about the liquidity, how the money can be infused into the companies, the impact on the economy. I think interestingly, the only difference I see that some companies Some countries have accepted it that yes, corona is there, so we got to be more restrictive in our movements, versus some countries have not yet accepted it, and they continue to have a free ride on their own people, and no lockdown impositions. So I think, but from the perspective of the models or the companies, we see that this is impacting the businesses very severely. And first, and I have two ways to look at it. One, from the client's perspective, from where each of us do our businesses, particularly the portfolio companies. I think over there, what we are seeing and what we are realizing, that given that the lockdown, the impact on the economy, and literally no cash in hands, and everybody will have to reboot and restart their businesses, there is going to be a significant impact. There are some sectors which are kind of have seen a huge growth in last 40-45 days, particularly the essential services supply, the healthcare, and others. But and so as those retailers who have been in that line. But by and large, when we look at from a trickle down effect on the economy, I think from a microfinance client perspective, or particularly the MSME clients who have been called as a major thrivers of the economy, there is a significant impact. And we don't know how many of those businesses will get shut down. What will be the impact? I think cash flow wise, they all are consuming their own cash flows while everybody has been locked down. So how would they really restart their businesses? So it would be very, very important as the lockdowns restrictions get lifted, how these guys can be supported with the capital, with the equity to get their businesses restarted. Then my other view is looking at our own portfolio companies or the industry at a large. If the economy is going to get suffered so much, then then how do we restart the businesses? While the moratorium has been offered partially by some, we have to offer the moratorium largely to all our clients, given that we understand the business is not there. So there is a huge ALM mismatch. And at the same time, how would you be out there to refinance or finance their businesses? And not only this, I think so far, if I particularly put my lens on the microfinance industry, or on Indian financial services industry, from the bottom of pyramid perspective, the technology use has been very, very limited. In the microfinance segment, all has been about group meetings. You put the people out there into the group, and then you collect the money in cash, and which is not going to be the new way of doing business. Given the social distancing has now come in, you cannot do the group meeting. So what would be the new ways of doing business? And I think I'm learning that everybody is talking about it, debating about it, and trying to go more and more digital using technology, which is what goes back to Vinay's point. I think tech and technology companies haven't seen much impact. I think there are going to be more and more opportunities for them, because everybody will need to be more and more digital savvy, more and more tech savvy, from clients to all the way to the company. So we'll have to evolve on our business models quite a lot, and see that how can we really have our outreach to the customers and serve them. And then summarizing it, I think the way I look at it, that from this pandemic perspective, the business models will evolve quite a lot, and we will have to see in time to come that how these business models have been more and more resilient, in order to be out at the front to meet the demands of the customers, and bring the changes into the model. We shouldn't be expecting that as soon as the lockdown is lifted, we go out and start collecting the money. We will have to look at it from a new lens of doing this business altogether differently. I think from an Axion's perspective, when we continue to look at it from an international perspective, we are evaluating our own portfolio companies. We continue to double down from an investment perspective. Where are we seeing the challenges in them, we are looking at doubling down our efforts, our investments in some of them. And not everybody is, or not all the companies are in the same leagues where they would need the double down efforts. I think it's a mixed of the reactions and the liquidity positions in the companies. At the same time, I think we continue to have and watch on the new pipeline. But having said that, I think given what we all are seeing, this is going to be a slightly tricky and more tricky from the perspective of One, how do you really see the companies? How do you really evaluate the new companies? Given again, travels are restricted. How do you do the due diligences? And so on and so forth. Another thing which has been, I'm sure, playing equally in the minds of the entrepreneurs as well as investors, how do you value these companies given there is so much of unforeseen out there into the future? We don't know how the portfolios would be performing. How do you really value some of these from an valuations perspective? So again, we have been looking at it, but I would say with the caution that this is, again, the efforts are first to take the internal stock what you have, double down the effort, and then start going out, look at the new stuff. So let me take a stop, Ashish, over there, and then we'll come back as you will have questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abhishek. I think you have given very good global perspective also, because in the past, Ebola and hurricane and although these were not impacting that much, they were, I think, in this specific country and always, but this scenario is in the across the world. So we'll come to you on question also. But before that, I would like to ask some one or two questions from Binay, because Binay has to leave. He has very important meeting, and I'm thankful to him that in spite of the important meeting with the investor, he has got time for us. So Binay, I think altogether different in terms of your fund strategy point of view, because you are into SME space, or you are into later stage deals and all basically. So if you see from the NBFC sector point of view, the companies which are into mid space, that like this RBI also defined this 500 to 5,000 crore book size NBFC. How do you see that? What will be the impact, and how you look at it? Suppose you want to invest, and what will be the I think ingredients which you would like to see in that company, so that the company, we have actually in this webinar, we have people who are from the NBFC, MFI, HFC. They are the founder and the co-founder of these companies, even fintech companies. We have invited the bankers who are from the treasury department, who are handling the LTRO funds. So they should also understand what will be the impact of the investment on the NBFC side and all. Then we have credit rating agencies also who are part of this discussion. So I think your views are very important from that point of view, that the companies which are into mid space, so that how you look at these companies from the investment point of view. Please.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, Ashish, and I think that's a question that we are trying to grapple with, and not just in financial services, right, across sectors. In fact, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're thinking in terms of, sort of sector agnostic strategy, we continue to look at deploying capital in companies. So we've not sort of stopped anything that we were doing, let's say 2 months back. We're still negotiating deals. We're still looking at term sheets and all of that. The only caveat is that we're obviously trying to look at sectors which have been less impacted by that, like I said, right, which is healthcare and technology, where we are still talking deals. And, all the valuations have sort of been adjusted a bit, actually quite a bit, more than a bit, but we're still talking deals there, right? So in financial services and NBFCs, as Abhishek said, we are looking at a wait and watch, because we honestly are not able to see whether it's going to be a short-term or a long-term impact here. Do we look at FY21 projections? How much do we impact that? And how do we look at the adjusted projections there? So obviously, the big question here is liquidity, right? As Abhishek said, the asset liability sort of match, hopefully with SBI and all of these other banks coming through, that may get resolved. And hopefully the SIDBI, NABARD financing that they're talking about, that RBI is going to look at releasing, that really does trickle into these mid and small firms. So far hasn't been that effective, but hopefully they find a channel to do that, and that is going to come in and let these guys do that. I think the biggest thing we are looking at, across sectors, is how resilient are these firms, right? Can they sustain what they're doing now? Obviously, everyone's being expected to cut non-essential spending and probably put a full stop on disbursement. But we're also looking at how operationally efficient these companies are, how resilient they are, and how do we sort of adjust that? And if they honestly, how are they going to weather that storm, right? And if we think that there is a good management team which has good potential, for instance, one of the companies that we were talking to, they've sort of looked at a workaround for the zero collections that are happening, and looked at digitization, and looked at very innovative means to sort of get collections going. Obviously, collections are nowhere close to what they should be for April, but still doing a great job on that, right? So we're looking at management teams which can be very innovative around these unforeseen times and turbulent times, and sort of come up with solutions. So having a good strong balance sheet. We're also seeing some of these mid-size firms doing internal rounds, and not doing smaller rounds and internal rounds, and sort of closing that out, right? So we're not seeing that many companies that way open for external rounds and additional sources of capital. So our strategy there is probably just wait till September, and then sort of rethink what we can do with some of these sectors that have been quite badly impacted, and then see how that goes. But hopefully the debt side of things also comes through, like I said, with all these different windows. The overall thinking here is that we've not really stopped deploying capital. We continue to do it. It's just that we're doing it with a very, very cautious sort of manner.
Sorry, that's a great part that you are continuing your investment. You are not stopping. So I think this is a hope to all that the money will come. May not be today, but maybe after some time. So Binay, one more question, which is very important in this current situation. That lot of companies, because we have all the small, mid, and large companies in the sector, so there will be some impact on some of the big players. They will be looking some kind of consolidation and all. So how do you see this, the consolidation, or maybe any kind of opportunities through your investing company? Or so will there be this kind of I think market where the people will say that I want to discontinue my business and I want some partner, strategic partner. So what kind of interest will be there from the your side or your investing company? Do you have any discussion on that?
Absolutely. I think consolidation is going to be a huge theme going forward, not just in terms of distressed sales, but also just companies which are subscale and not able to access capital as is happening now, just joining forces with a larger sort of firm, which probably has a better credit rating, and then sort of going to the market to raise equity or debt together, right? So a number of those consolidation situations will happen. Plus, I mean, as it is in the NBFC space, probably valuations were under pressure given what's been happening in the last 18 months due to several other issues. So that will probably be even more under severe pressure now, and that obviously gives an opportunity for the well-capitalized firms to take advantage. Now, well-capitalized is a relative term these days. So as long as they have liquidity to sustain themselves, and then have some sort of maybe innovative means, maybe stock transfer deals, minimal use of cash, things like that, I think will certainly happen, right? That sort of consolidation wave is going to happen for sure. And I think even for the companies, the smaller subscale companies which are targets of this, they should also think about whether joining forces really makes sense at this point, and maybe it's a better way to go, because we really don't know how long this crisis is going to last. So if there's a win-win sort of situation where a deal can happen, then they should certainly go for it.
Thank you, Binay. Thank you very much for joining with us. So now we have Mr. Anurag Agrawal, who is from Avishkar. Anurag, can you hear us? I think there was some problem in his mic.
Yeah, I can hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, great. We can hear you also. So thank you, Anurag, for joining with us. And so Anurag is from Avishkar. I think Avishkar is a well-known, I said, Indian, I think, Avishkar in the investment side, actually. If you see, Avishkar he started investing in this space way back, actually, when people were not aware that how this NBFC will get equity and all. So they are basically, I'll say that in the innovation kind of situation for the NBFC sector, and they've invested in many companies. So it would be great if, Anurag, you can brief about your fund and how do you see the situation and going forward.
Sure. Thanks, Ashish. Hello, everyone. Since I'm going last, I think a lot has already been said. So obviously, I'll try and keep myself brief and try and be more responsive to the questions. So quickly, Avishkar is a impact-focused platform. We started about 20 years ago, and we've been engaged in this space now fairly deeply, both in financial services as well as other sectors which are high on impact, like agri, livelihoods, education, healthcare, clean energy, waste, water. So we have a fairly wide portfolio. We are currently investing out of our sixth fund, and we have over 65 investments across our portfolio, ranging across these different funds with different vintages. And we've also had a lot of exits. We have over 30 odd exits already in the space, many from the financial inclusion space as well. In fact, we've had two dedicated funds for financial inclusion, and we have a fairly large portfolio there. And it's spread across, SFBs, microfinance institutions, SME lending institutions, micro housing, BCs, fintechs, payment companies. So it's a pretty wide mix. And apart from the investing activity, we ourselves are owner operators. So we run two NBFCs ourselves. One a microfinance company, Arohan, and other SME focused platform called Ashwa, formerly known as Intelligno. So so we are not only investors, but we also operate as owner operators, as promoters. We are also in the shoes of the entrepreneurs on the other side. So can speak from both sides. So primarily, obviously, given the broad diversified portfolio that we have, it's quite clear that there is a big impact of this crisis on pretty much all businesses. It's very hard to say, except for a very few. Most businesses have been negatively impacted, especially for financial services. In the short term, I think it's all about liquidity, ALM, survival. Given that the moratorium has been by and large extended to all the clients of MFIs and even small SME business lending businesses, even HFCs. So by and large, there's no incoming cash flow that is there. And we all know that there has been some resistance from the banks and other NBFCs who are lenders to such institutions in terms of extending the moratorium. So, that's a tough back and forth that is going on with the lenders right now for these institutions to manage the situation. Hopefully, things will ease out after May once the moratorium is lifted. There is some talk of extension of moratorium as well, which will make this situation even more extreme. So I think, in the immediate term, it's about liquidity management. How do you sort of manage your ALM and cash flows? Once you get past that, and once the moratorium goes off, then the real situation starts to emerge in terms of what sort of repayments you're seeing. And there are all kinds of guesses in terms of what is expected to happen, right? People are saying anything from 20% to 90% kind of repayment rates. And somewhere in between those kind of repayment rates will, how they play out will determine what sort of institutions survive. At 20% repayments, nobody will survive. And at 90%, a large percentage of people will survive. And in between, depending on capital adequacy and leverage, etc., people will be able to come out of this crisis or not. Usually in financial services, leverage is seen as an indication of the ability of the institution to, it's a sign of efficiency, and investors see it positively. But in this current environment, actually, the less leveraged ones are probably much better positioned. So, that's the second element. Once the repayments start coming in, how do you manage it? Some of it is not going to be in your control, but a lot of it will be in control. So how proactive the institutions are in engaging with their customers. Already since the lockdown has been partially relaxed, there are different classifications: green, amber, red zones, and bulk of the people are able to operate on the ground. So, for instance, our own institution, Arohan, has about 700 branches. About 550 of them are actually already operational this week. Because of by virtue of being in operational zone. So similarly, depending on what sort of footprint people have, more rural will probably be better positioned. Those who have banking license were already operating, so they already have a head start. So I guess those are in slightly better position as well. So in terms of engaging with the clients proactively, in terms of tweaking your processes, to collect digital payments, etc. I think those institutions who are able to move that move will probably be better positioned. And I think that will probably play out over a 18 to 24-month period in terms of actually what happens. This microfinance sector in particular has gone through several crises before, fairly big ones, the Andhra crisis, the demonetization crisis. Although this is not exactly similar to that, but in some sense, people have faced those challenges and come out. Clients are quite resilient. We're already seeing, although anecdotal so far, people already coming and making voluntary repayments in spite of the moratorium. So we've had a case where somebody has cycled 115 kilometers to come and make a repayment. So those kind of examples are also there. So while there will be hits, but if managed properly, one can come out of it. It's also extremely important to make sure that you have adequate level of capitalization. If you are highly leveraged, this is the time to actually proactively raise capital. I think valuations will certainly take a hit, but this is not the time to secure valuation. It is more the time to secure your institution. So there are people who are investing, like Vinay had mentioned, people are actively investing. We have been actively investing as well. We actually made two investments post the lockdown, one in a fintech company called Checkbook, and another in an agri company called Ergos. And we have sufficient dry powder left within the fund that we are investing off currently. But since the fund had already made most of its portfolio investments that it had to make, most of it is reserved for existing companies. But simultaneously, what we've done is, we've gone back to our LPs because we have a lot of portfolio companies from previous funds which don't have enough runway or need more runway to come out of this. To raise more capital for them, we've got fairly active, very good response from our LPs. So that's going well. We are in fairly advanced situation. Now, one thing that we are approaching slightly differently from how the LPs were looking at it originally, we are not really trying to give money to companies which were anyways dying, right, irrespective of the crisis, and giving them survival funding to survive for another 3 months, 6 months. What we have identified from within our portfolio are companies which already have demonstrated a strong business model, have good strong teams, and we believe will emerge stronger, although they may take some short-term hits, but may emerge stronger out of this crisis. And we are doubling down on those companies. So that's been our approach, and we've got fairly good response from our LPs, and we've reserved more capital from our existing funds for those. So that's basically been our approach to dealing with this. In the long term, we do see a lot of opportunities to emerge, especially on the M&A side, especially on tweaking your systems and processes in terms of how you deal with your customers and processes. So there will be a new normal that will emerge out of it, and those institutions who are proactively dealing with those things will probably emerge from it. So I'll stop here.
Oh, great. So I think very well said, Anurag. I think you have given the direction also. That's a great, I think, your deliberation. And as you have rightly said that keep raising equity, although the evaluations may be on the lower side. But when as an investment banker, when we are talking to the companies and all the companies are discussing with us, the question is coming, people are saying, why to dilute our equity at the low valuation? This is a big question. Many times people want to, because there is some emotional, I think, situation also there whenever they are diluting the equity. So I think from all of you, from all these three eminent speakers, you want to take this question basically with them. What should be the thought process of the promoter and founder when they are going for raising equity in this difficult time? Because this is a very important question in this current scenario. Because as I told, that equity and debt both are like husband and wife. So we are talking about debt in length and breadth. I think everybody is talking debts in morning to evening. But equity, if you will not see the equity, then tomorrow what will happen actually? You cannot sustain or you cannot grow also basically. So I would like to just, I think, understand from all of you that whenever the promoter has to decide that I want to raise equity, even the valuations are not good, what should be their thought process or what should they look for actually in this market? Will it be possible for you to, I think, comment on that?
Sure.
I think, yeah.
Go ahead, Anurag.
Yeah.
I can give after you. Go ahead, Anurag. I think you
Yeah,
were
so
going
I
first.
think, first and foremost, it's about survival. I think as promoters, we ourselves are promoters, and we were in fact in the midst of a capital raise where a term sheet was signed, and the investors basically took a pause button and said, we want to see how things will pay out, and then fire the bullet. So in this kind of a situation, you can just wait and see, what happens, or you can try and move things forward. We've gone for the latter. What we have basically tried to do is to continue engaging with our investors. And we've tried to come up with alternate ways of seeing how we can move forward quickly. So, one thing that you can do is to come to a reasonable, you have to accept the reality that, situation and the risks that are in play right now are different from what it used to be 3 months ago. So you have to sort of factor that in and be flexible on what sort of entry valuations you are willing to offer. Or alternatively, what you can look out is, come up with some kind of a structure where, once these risks play out, you come up with some kind of a convertible structure, which is fair on both sides. It
Right.
has upside protection for the investors and create some kind of upside for you if you come out of this relatively unscathed. So you can create those kind of structures as well, where the money comes in to secure the business, and the valuation is determined at a later date based on benchmarks or another transaction, or what's happening in the listed space. So those kind of structures can be worked out, but it will be foolhardy in my view to not take money, even if it is only from existing set of investors or from outsiders. Most of the existing investors, I'm just sort of we heard Vinay talk about how they are doubling down on their portfolio companies. We are doing exactly the same thing. The first priority is to back those who you've already backed, and not back people just because this situation has arisen, because they've proven themselves over time, and we genuinely believe in the business model. And actually, our experience in Avishkar has been, we've been very, very active investors, both during the AP crisis time as well as the demonetization time. And the investments that we made during those periods actually have given us the best returns in hindsight. So, sometimes these kind of opportunities also from an investor perspective gives you the best kind of opportunities. And the companies that are well capitalized right now will also be very well positioned to leapfrog their standing in the industry. M&A opportunities will emerge. You can expand both within your space as well as in adjacent spaces. So it's a great time to you are all at home. They have a lot of time at hand to think beyond the obvious, and actually look to grow your business beyond what you were thinking, than just staying in the status quo.
Great, sir. Great. So, Abhishek, would you want to take this question? Or?
Sure. So I think a lot has already been added by Anurag on this. So very little to add. But I would say I think another perspective to it is unless the promoters are going to put their own money also into the company. The another way I'm just bringing to look at it, your number of shares are not really going to change. It's all about the valuation and dilution. Now, if your number of shares are not going to really change into the company, then I would go with what Anurag was saying. I think it's very important based on your own cash flow position in the company, given in this current time, to take up as much as possible. Again, you don't want to beat yourself down. If you are well capitalized, you have resources, then there is no need to beat yourself down. But at the same time, I think if the liquidity is available, because investors are going to be cautious, and investors, as I think we are all hearing from the four set of investors, that the first priority is there to look at your own portfolio companies, their own portfolio companies, and at the same time, I think all of us are open and are looking at for the good opportunities in the market. But given that's the preference order, I think we should look at the promoters should be open to lap up the opportunity and get the good quality investors with, because again, valuations and the money and the quality of investors are interlinked. You can get great valuations, very very high valuations, but you also need investors in these times who are willing to stick around with you, who have the ability to double down in the companies when there is a risky time. We don't know how long this crisis is going to last. All of us wish that this could be short lived and we can be back to the normal. But what if you need to double down in the companies, and if you're looking at your investors, and if you're finding, oh, this is not possible, then what do you do with high valuation? I think you also don't want to be put under the constraints of then selling down your asset at a later stage in stress. So it's very, very important. Then we often get caught, and Ashish, thank you very much for bringing this up. So candid question. We often get caught in this game of valuation, high valuation versus the quality of investor. And I think it is and as Anurag said, that everybody is looking at for the right opportunities, whether it is investors or it is entrepreneurs. I think it is about that how you are able to seize up the good quality investor. That's my advice to the entrepreneurs. You look at the right set of investors who are willing to stay there with you for long term rather than taking the short calls. And as and when any of these crises hit, then willing to find the other ways around. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think it's a great food for thought which we have given to all the participants. So I think we have already hit the time, but I'll just take one or two questions. So the Smriti, as you mentioned in your I think first deliberation, that the social parameters, or you see the social I think angle. So what are these social angles which you generally see when you invest in the company? Because we have some of the NBFC or MFI people who are here in this discussion. We would like to know.
So, as far as social aspects are concerned, from our perspective, I think the first thing is who's the customer segment that we are targeting. The more rural, the more tier 3, 4, and below is where we see financial inclusion really being addressed, and that is our target segment. And this is, of course, specific to NMI as well. But also, what we look at is how are the customers being treated, across the board. What kind of interests are being charged? What kind of income generation activity are they involved in, and so on and so forth. So as far as India is concerned, I think the RBI code of conduct is very stringent and covers a lot of aspects which we as social investors look at. So the companies which are really adhering to the guidelines given by the RBI will be the first step for us, or the first filter that we look at. Apart from that, of course, we follow and endorse the CPP Smart Campaign principles, which we don't expect our investee companies to already be endorsing or to start have with when we invest. But we also look at the competence of the organization to adhere to Smart Campaign principles, and the willingness of the promoters to be able to deliver on those. So I think a meeting of minds in terms of social vision is important for us when we invest, and we start monitoring our portfolio companies on that basis.
Great, great. So thank you very much, Smriti. I think one last question, which is I think very different kind of question, and which is hovering around when we are talking the founders and the promoters of the NBFCs. So there is a comparison always why the fintechs are getting so much high valuation, why the NBFC are not getting the high valuation. So if you see, this question is coming to you also. I think whenever you are talking to your investee companies. So would you like to take this question? What is the different in fintech, not into the NBFC, the fintech which are into loss making, even they don't have much of the revenue. In spite of it, they are getting the valuation which is more than the bank valuation. Actually, if you see, some of the banks are not having this valuation that the fintech are having, like Paytm. Paytm is having wonderful. I think the unicorn startup unicorn in the country. So I think Abhishek has a lot of investment in the fintech side. I think Anurag, you also have the lot of investment. So would you like to give some, I think, thought on that why they are having the valuation high and why they NBFC are not having? Please.
On a lighter note, Ashish, if we all can understand it, will be fantastic. I think this is a little bit of agony. But no, I think quickly next perspective. The one of the reason probably for it is, and again, don't get me wrong, NBFCs and the MFIs particularly have also seen a very, very high valuations back in the days. There were days when some of these assets were trading 5 times, 7 times book multiple as well. And we again, while the MFI NBFCs see a lower multiples these days, but the MSME financing has again been seeing a very high multiples, anywhere starting from 3.5 all the way up to higher numbers. Don't want to quote the numbers now on this, and then I will be caught on it later on when I'm talking to the company. But the challenge is, I think this is very true, that the fintechs versus the traditional balance sheet driven models are very different, and that just has to do with two three things. One, the ability to leverage your capital. I think in the balance sheet and the in these regulatory models, given the high capital leverage, and sorry, given the low capital leverage versus the fintech models, you are driving on somebody else's balance sheet largely. You don't have your own balance sheet. Um, that's one. Second is, given the use of technology, what the underlying thesis is there, that when these companies are using the technology, the ability to scale and reach the have the outreach will be multifold. Unlike in the traditional institutions, you can open 10 branches, 20 branches, 40 branches, you can double, triple the efforts. Whereas in the fintech models, the growth is really exponential. You would have seen it, how the WhatsApp has been able to reach out to millions and now billion users over a very short journey, with and again managed with a very small set of team. So all what we look at in the fintechs is their OpEx are very low, the ability to scale is very high, and then by virtue of these two, the impact which they create, not only in terms of return on equity, return on asset, but even the ability to make the impact. As Smriti said, the social impact indicators are very important for all of us. So when we look at and evaluate the companies who are able to move the needle in the bottom of pyramid, and that's why we started our own fintech fund. That was the first fintech fund. And we have also gone through the journey of looking at these in high valuations to now reasonable. But that scale itself on a lower cost operating cost brings the power in the hands of the fintech companies to get valued differently. Having said that, I think the slight disadvantage with the fintechs is also they are still evolving. I think not a lot of fintech companies have been able to reach the profits or the ROEs. They all are still evolving. They are still proving the metal out there that yes, their models are there. Whereas banks and the financial institutions have already seen a huge growth and huge balance sheet. So the other indicator on some of these companies, given that a lot of these are early stages, and I would not say likes of Paytms and others to compare them, but when you look at a large set of population, a lot of fintech companies are still early stages. And in early stages companies, the valuation numbers really doesn't matter so much.
Great. Rightly said. I think Abhishek, you are giving complete perspective. So that I think they are doing. I think I would like to add that they are doing something innovative also, which is something new, which was not done earlier by somebody. So this is also adding in their valuation. So great. I think Anurag, would you like to comment on that also?
I think Abhishek has covered it quite well. Obviously, one aspect of the valuation is the growth potential. The other aspect is, the capital efficiency, the higher theoretical leverage that you can get. Although many of them are so well capitalized that the leverage ratios in the sector could be much lower. Also, at least from Avishkar, we've been very conservative in the way we've looked at it. Our view is that a lot of the traditional NBFCs will also need to transform into, have to carry out fairly significant digital transformation. So the way we look at it is that eventually these things will merge into each other. So a lot of the NBFCs of today will operate as, fintech companies in the future, and therefore that premium or the difference that you currently see or used to see in the past will probably start withering away.
Okay, great. So I think we are at the end of the session. There one last question from the regulator point of view, because you all are the investors. You are already managing your investee companies. So what do you think that from the regulator side, or maybe SEBI or RBI, what should be the relief which can be given to the NBFCs, MFI, or HFCs, or fintech companies, so they can survive and they can grow also? Because ultimately these companies are helping the funded unfunded people. Actually, they are funding to the people who are unfunded. And if the money will not reach to the villages or to the rural areas or semi-urban areas, these people will be impacted more actually. So if you can give at least one point from your point of view, what the regulator should do for this sector, so that this will be a great help to the all the participants.
Should I go first?
Should I?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the current situation requires. There have been already a lot of steps taken by the RBI. In fact, we had written a set of recommendations to the RBI governor, and by and large, in his initial speech that he came out with, he covered most of those requests that we had made. So I think from a direction point of view, the government and the RBI are already taking all the steps. I think the key issue really is in terms of transmission of what the regulator is saying versus what the lenders are able to do downstream. So maybe one radical step that the RBI could do is to actually step in place of the banks and actually either guarantee or itself directly lend to some of these institutions.
Okay. Great. Great. Ismati, do you have anything in your mind which?
Yeah, I think I'll just add on to what Anurag said. That was exactly my view as well. But I think what one needs to keep in mind is that currently it's about liquidity for the next 3 months. But what will happen once the lockdowns are over and the economic activity really starts? There is going to be a huge demand that is going to come up. And who is going to service that demand? I think the RBI and the government has to look at it from that perspective and make sure that, at least I can speak for the MFI segment, that make sure that the NBFC MFIs have enough cash on hand to actually give these loans to people to restart and get back to normalcy as soon as they can. So I think one is about liquidity and sustenance, and second is also about how are we going to cater to the demand that is going to come up now in the next 3 months. And if, as Anurag said, if RBI can intervene directly and not through multiple channels, I think that will be the best option for the industry.
Great. 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 Thank you. So, Abhishek, do you have anything in your mind? I think from international, if you have some experience market where the other governments did.
So quickly to add to, I think what the Smriti and Anurag already said, I think it would be great given the future demand coming up. I think moratorium is already fantastic and the initiatives taken. But if government can put some type of an guarantee fund mechanism, I think one of the
Great.
fear in everybody's mind is that what will happen when I go for lending, fresh refinancing, because economy is not going to do great. So what government needs to do, which is what is happening in number of countries. In fact, we have Peru and the uh, Peru's finance minister, who is 35 years old young lady. She has been now called as a stalwart or as a rock star, given the package which she has come up, very bold packages. I think similarly, the what government needs to do here is that come up with the guarantee fund mechanism where some percentage of fresh lending can be covered. So the NBFCs, the banks, the lenders aren't worried that how to underwrite this risk. The whole economy needs to be rebooted. So if there is a 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, I don't have the right number in my mind, but I'm just saying if there is a guarantee fund mechanism being put out there which gives the comfort to the lenders, not worry about, because it's all about the next 6 months. How do you revive the economy? How do you put the money in the hands of that entrepreneur so that he can restart the business? And we know the entrepreneurs, they will, and institutions know how to lend it appropriately. But if they are not going to be worried about the bankers coming on their head to recollect this money, and if there is this guarantee fund mechanism being put in place, I think we can give it a very fast revival.
Great, great, Abhishek. So I think we are at the fag end of the our session, and so with this discussion, we can come out that from the investor side, I think there is no roadblock. Everybody is looking for good opportunities, and everybody wants to invest. Or they, first, I think the priority for everybody is for investing in their existing companies to survive them and to basically sustain them also. And then there can be a lookout for the good opportunities also in the market, and there can be inorganic opportunities also where the investing company can look at, I think, to some kind of consolidation also. And the valuation side also is a discussion where as Anurag told, that valuation will be impacted, but we should not look at from that point of view. You should look at from the future point of view, how the company will grow. And then maybe after some time, you will be the winner in this situation. Then you can get the higher valuation after some time. So it's a good discussion. And I would say that keeping in mind all these things, there are champions in the industry. The AU is a best example. They got, I think their book started in the period when the Lehman crisis had happened and all. And they got equity at that period, a very low valuation. And you can see today, it's I think the small finance bank, which is the most successful in the country. So this is my advice to all the founders of this space, NBFC and the HFC and MFI, that keep talking to your stakeholders, whether say investor or say lender or say rating agency, because this time is very important to give the confidence to your stakeholder that you are with them, and whatever you are doing, you keep transparent also, so that whenever you will approach for any kind of requirement, they will support you. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you all, and we hope so that the participant could get some kind of learning. And I think that 1 hour is less for this session. There are a lot of questions which are not discussed here, but we'll try to have another session also where we can take up these questions. So thank you, Anurag, thank you, Abhishek, and thank you, Smriti, and in absentia, Vivek also, Vinay also, for taking out time. And you are all busy to help your existing companies also. But in spite of it, you could spare time, and your views are very important from the industry player point of view. So thank you very much, and we end of this session today now. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you.
Very. Bye-bye.
Bye.